Hello everyone and welcome to a really wonderful game that I did not have plans on showing today, but then all of a sudden I did, as I've seen this photo on Twitter. I mean, I've seen it many times, but this time Douglas Griffin posted it on Twitter, and he just said, like, you know, it's a wonderful photo, always to remember it, and he gave some additional info about the photo, how it was taken in the 1960 in the Olympiad. It was the first clash between Bobby Fischer and Mikhail after Tal became the world chess champion after defeating Mikhail Botvinnik. And I was thinking, okay, but yeah, certainly I've shown this game, and then I was really interested if I've actually shown this game, because I know I've pretty much shown all of Fischer and Tal's games, but then it turns out I didn't, which is odd. I mean, I might have shown it, but I have like 3,000 videos and I don't always name them properly, so maybe I have shown it, but I really don't remember it. So I decided to show it to you, and you know, once I started checking out the moves, I don't remember actually ever showing it. So it's the 7th encounter between Bobby Fischer and Mikhail Tal, but it's the first encounter since Mikhail Tal became the world chess champion. So it's a very special one, and it's always a special one for Fischer until a certain point, because he never defeated Tal. The first two games that they played, the one in 1958 in Portorož and the 1959 in Zurich, ended in a draw, and then in the 1959 candidates tournament in Bled, Belgrade and Zagreb, Bobby lost all 4 classical games to Tal, which is incredible. I mean, of course, Tal was the stronger player, but to not even get a single draw, that's pretty spectacular on Tal's part especially, and it really helped Tal to win the 1959 candidates tournament. So now this is game 7 between the two of them, and another chance for Bobby to take at least one win away from the Magician of Riga, especially now as he is a world champion. So this is a tremendous opportunity for Bobby. He does have the white pieces, and well, let's dive straight into it, and then we are going to discuss a little bit more. So Fischer has the white pieces, and he opens with e4, and already a surprise from Tal on the first move. He opens with e6. This game is regarded by some as one of the modern chess brilliancies, and you will soon understand why. Some commentators throughout the past said that it was full of mistakes and that it really wasn't anything special, especially since it's a Bobby Fischer against the world champion Mikhail Tal. But you know, now we have the assistance of our good friend the engine, and you know, the engine is always right, basically, and this game is quite the masterpiece. So Tal says that he chose the French defense because he already, even though he was a world champion, he respected Fischer tremendously, and he and his team, especially his second and the trainer Alexander Koblenz, decided that it would be maybe too dangerous to play something like the Sicilian or e5 going to the Ruy Lopez against Bobby. So maybe a nice French defense, as Bobby wasn't. I mean, Bobby was always strong, but maybe he was not as strong in weird positions that could arise in the French defense. And they also did some special work on the Winawer variation, as you'll see. So of course d4, we have d5, and knight to c3. We have bishop to b4. The Winawer variation is on the board. e5 advancing the pawn, and now pawn to c5 striking against the center. We have a3, and now pretty much bishop captures on c3 is an automatic. You guys had this position on the board many times, but here Tal goes bishop to a5. So he says that back in 1954, in the 9th game of the Smyslov-Botvinnik match, it was played, and also Botvinnik did some work on this in the match against Uncika in Amsterdam Olympiad, but it was kind of decided that the bishop to a5 line wasn't all that impressive, and that black really has nothing to hope for here. But he and his team did some work on it, and it seems that it is possible to get some action with this bishop to a5 idea. So it's very interesting to see what the bishop has in store for this, because of course Fischer has a reply to everything when it comes to openings. So here b4. Pretty much the strongest move in any position. We have c captures on d4, and now queen to g4, going after the g7 pawn. Even though nowadays knight to b5 is much more common, and then black has to move the bishop to c7, for example. You win the bishop pair and you defend your e5 pawn, and this is perfectly fine. White will have a very enjoyable game. But Fischer went for queen to g4. He goes after the g7 pawn, and now knight to e7. Now, again, it's a well-known fact that you can give up these 2 pawns in the French defense. So first, B captures on A5, D captures on C3, and now Queen captures on G7. Rook to G8 and Queen captures on H7, and now Knight B to C6. Tal just continues development, goes after the E5 pawn. So Knight to F3, Fischer defends the pawn, and now Queen to C7, putting more pressure on the E5 pawn, developing the queen. Also, Tal wants to play Bishop D7 and castle queen side. And here, Bishop to B5. Up until this point, 2 of them have played incredibly precise moves, and this is main theory even today in 2022. Only nowadays Bishop to F4 is known as the absolute strongest continuation, and you will see how this is missing from this game. If the bishop is on F4, then it's a much different game. But here, Fischer went for Bishop to B5. He develops the bishop, pins the knight, and now Bishop to D7. We have castles kingside by Fischer and castles queenside by Tal. So castles are on opposite sides of the board. Of course, this means that we are going to have fireworks on the board. And here, Fischer played Bishop to G5. It's very interesting that both Fischer and Tal annotated this game in their book. Fischer in the my 60 memorable games book, and Tal in the life and games of Mikhail Tal. And Bishop to G5 is definitely not the way to go. Fischer says that he achieved a fairly winning position very early on, but he very unwisely permits Tal to unleash what Tal unleashes best. Now, before we go into what happens after Bishop to G5, what are some of the options here? Now, after the game, Fischer recommends Bishop captures on C6, but it's definitely worth exploring this. Fischer gives the next line: Bishop captures on C6, Queen captures on F7, and now Pawn to D4 as best for black. And of course, this is all confirmed by the engine. Queen captures on E6 with check, and here's where Fischer gives the best move to be Bishop to D7, just giving up the knight. For example, Bishop to D7, now Queen captures on E7, Rook captures on G2 with check, King captures on G2, and now Bishop to H3, where Black will win the White Queen. King captures on H3, Queen captures on E7, and now Bishop to G5 with a winning position for White. And while this is correct, it's not the only way to play this. And of course, now, okay, you can play Queen to H7 check, King to G3, Queen captures on C2, you create the 2 incredibly strong pass pawns, but after Bishop captures, King captures, and Knight captures on D4, the rooks will prevent you from ever queening that pawn, and White just has enough material to actually win this game. So what Fischer missed here, and it's very peculiar why this happens, is that he says that if King to B8, then a Knight to G5, and White's position is just completely dominant, that Black can resign this. But it's not, it doesn't appear to be so. After Bishop to A4, which is the strongest move recommended by the engine, there isn't all that much that White can do to prove this point. For example, Queen to F6, Rook G to F8, you go after the Queen. Queen to G7, we can go Rook to G8. Queen to F6, Rook G to F8, and it doesn't appear like there's all that much. If you allow Bishop captures on C2, then the pass pawns will be incredibly strong, but you just don't allow something like Knight to E6 or it's a very rich position. Of course, there's much more to play for, but with precise play, it's actually a dead draw. So this would be possible. Another thing you could consider here, instead of Bishop captures on C6, the recommendation from Fischer's book, is just Rook to E1. You just defend the E5 pawn, and you are happy with everything, because now the trick of Knight captures on E5, with the idea that if Bishop captures, Knight captures, isn't really all that impressive, because now after Queen captures on F7, White is definitely much better. For example, the Knight is hanging here, so let's say Knight to C5, we defend the Knight, Bishop to F4, and already this Queen does not have a lot of squares, especially as the Knight is now coming to E5. Let's say Queen D7, Knight E5, Queen here. Now you can even trade captures, Rook A to B1, and White has an amazing position. This would be most likely winning, especially if you consider the two pass pawns here. But okay, after Rook to E1, of course, you don't have to go for the tricky Knight captures on E5. You could just play Queen captures on A5, and the game continues. Very very complicated, but it's definitely possible to play it for both sides. Rook to b1, let's say knight to f5, bishop to g5, bishop comes to f6, and it's a really wild position. But okay, Fischer kind of hurried this bishop to g5 move, and now Tal unleashes what he does best. Knight captures on e5. A dazzling array of fireworks, as Fischer puts it. So here, if you go bishop captures on d7, it's not a problem. We're going to play rook captures on d7, knight captures on e5, queen captures on e5, the bishop now hanging, so you don't have time to capture on f7, pawn to h4, and now queen to f5. Tal would be able to force a queen trade. Let's say queen captures, knight captures, and the game continues with chances for both sides. It's knight against the bishop. Fischer does have the doubled a pawn, but with perfect play it should be a draw. But it would be very interesting. So instead, after knight captures on e5, Fischer goes for just a whole lot of trades, a capture fest, if you will. Knight captures on e5, bishop captures on b5, now attacking the rook. Knight captures on f7, attacking the rook on d8. Tal captures the rook on f1. Fischer captures the rook on d8. We have rook captures on g5, and knight captures on e6 with a beautiful fork here, attacking the rook and the queen. And now Tal goes for rook captures on g2. And here, you have to give it up, as the queen was also attacked. And now you would expect Fischer to play king captures on f1, but Fischer plays king to h1, because if you capture on f1, it's not as clear what is happening here. Now you can play rook captures on h2, and now the white queen is hanging also, and you can't give this check due to the knight. The rook also covers h8, and if you go for a queen trade here, knight captures, rook captures, how do you save the knight? If you move the knight, then rook to h1 check picks up the rook on a1. This is just lost for Fischer. So here he wouldn't be able to trade queens here. He would have to go for something else, like queen to f7, but then we continue with queen to c4 check, and the game continues, but it's much different. Let's say rook to h8, and the game stays alive. You can't really go for the knight here, because if you capture the knight, then you just get nicely checkmated. Queen to g4 check, king f1, and rook h1 checkmate. So it's definitely a good idea for Fischer not to capture the bishop. He plays king to h1, and now Tal's queen is just hanging. He has to deal with this. So queen to e5 attacks Fischer's queen, and now rook captures on f1. Grabbing that bishop, we have queen captures on e6, and king captures on g2, grabbing the rook. And here Tal played queen to g4 check, and he was in this position on move 21 that the game ended in a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. Fischer is up material. He has the rook against the knight, so of course Tal will be forced to pursue a draw by repetition. Let's say king to h1, queen to f3 check, king g1, and now of course queen to g4 with check, and we will have a draw by threefold repetition. So really exciting game. The game 7 between the two of them ends in a draw, which is good for Fischer. At least he stops the bleeding, as he did lost the 4 previous games he played the Tal in the Bled Belgrade and Zagreb candidates tournament. So now a draw is definitely comes in handy. And yeah, if you guys are interested in what happens next, their next game will be on Bled. It will be played next year in 1961, and this is actually the first time that Fischer ever defeats Tal. I've made a video on it some 5 years ago, so maybe if you guys want to check it out, it's quite the game. Features a beautiful queen sacrifice, if you can call it that. If you think it needs a remake, there's also a nice story about Bobby Fischer on a boat with Dmitry Bielitsa, so maybe you guys, if you haven't heard it, you might enjoy that as well. But yeah, I am willing to do a remake of it if you guys think that it's necessary. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. First board, USA versus Soviet Union. If you guys are interested in the standings of the Olympiad, these are the standings. Soviet Union, of course, won the event, as they usually did, followed by second place United States, Yugoslavia in third place, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Argentina, West Germany, East Germany, Netherlands, Romania, and England, and those were the standings. So yeah, and that's the game and the standings. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's check out this photo one more time, because it's really awesome. I could really, it's very sad that I don't have this framed somewhere in my house, but I just don't have a good place in my house for to hang a photo like this. But I will make room for it. Next photo I publish will be this photo framed somewhere in my house. I'm certain of that. So yeah, really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I didn't miss anything. Really, I was trying to give you as much information about the game as possible. Like I said, it was covered in both of their books, and pretty much everyone in the world annotated it. So I was very surprised that I didn't cover this game, or maybe I did. If I did, you know, feel free to remind me in the comments. Yeah, it's very hard to keep track of all the videos. So yeah, once again, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Simon Schofield, John Shirtlift, Robert Mandeville, David McFarland, and John Austin for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Tomorrow, the Grand Chess Tour in Croatia takes off, so we will probably cover a few games from that. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.